point. And next up, so this will be the last speech here in the marketing track. It's going to be Pauliina, and she's talking about branding deep tech from a VC's perspective. So welcome, Pauliina, with a round of applause. Green.
Apple, Airbnb, Spotify. We've all seen impressive brands, felt inspired by their great value props, seen the headlines they've generated, and wanted to be part of their captivating stories, whether as customers, employees, or the lucky ones, investors. And probably if you're a founder, you've explained to someone that you want to be like Apple or Spotify of insert any industry here. But you don't get to this point by just saying, hey, let's design a new logo. It takes strong vision, tons of resources, market research, user research, work around your product strategy, work around building your company consistently, and so forth. But in my job, I actually feel that people often miss the point. I work as an investment director at Maki VC, and we invest in deep tech and brand-driven companies across consumer and enterprise spaces. And I work closely with our portfolio companies on their commercialization strategies. So I discuss these things with entrepreneurs quite a bit. And way too often I hear, we don't need to think about marketing or branding, we're still in the R&D phase. Or, we are going to hire a CMO when we're done with our product. Or my personal favorite, we just hired an intern and he or she will develop our brand and conduct our communication strategy. And don't get me wrong, I have nothing against interns or office managers, but try and imagine this in any other role or function. I mean, think about it. How often do chief strategy officers let interns make critical business decisions? That's right, they really don't. So let me get theoretical for a moment, although I know it's not always appreciated in the startup world. This is one way, or this is probably one way that explains the sort of a misconception here and the underlying issue. And I think it can be explained through the marketing mix, or the so-called 4 Ps of marketing. So to me, it seems that many startups seem to think that marketing or branding only relates to promotion, whereas in reality, it has to do with strategic choices around things like price, product, or place. So it has to do with questions such as, who's our customer? What do they expect from our product or our firm? What's our pricing strategy? What's our distribution strategy? And these all fall under the same marketing and branding function. And yet, as said, some seem to think that all it takes to be a good marketeer is the ability to write a good social media post, hence the reason why we see so many interns / office managers / CMOs at early stage startups. Which gets me to my second semi-theoretical point, and trust me, this is the last one. But this is one way that I've tried to explain to our deep tech portfolio companies or the scientists in the team what a brand is or what branding means. And so the way I look at brands is a bit like onions. So at the core, you have your product and your strategy and your value prop that is derived from these two. And at the top layer of the onion, you have your audience and your potential customers. And how you actually communicate that core to your audience through different choices when it comes to, for instance, your price or packaging or website or founding story or overall the values that you stand for, that is actually your brand. And I would actually argue that the most important job for marketing in the very beginning is not about PR or it's not about growth, but it's actually defining your product with an insanely good value proposition. And only after that, making sure that your first users are the right users, and only after that, building that brand consistently to reach that top layer. Yet somehow again, even if you understood the strategic role that marketing can play for an early stage startup, it seems that many completely overlook it when it comes to deep tech startups. And one thing that maybe explains it a bit is the discussion I hear around the different risk profiles between normal tech startups and deep tech startups. So with normal tech startups, it is often thought that the following carries the most risk. Is your addressable market big enough? Or does your startup have a unique enough value proposition? Or can you execute fast enough? So it's often thought that, or the sort of a base case assumption is that market trends and timing are probably favorable. I mean, why else would smart VCs invest in such space? Probably there are others in the same space trying to build something somewhat similar. And so the winner is whoever actually runs the fastest. And so marketing is thought to have this role as a business accelerator. With deep tech startups, the situation is as follows. It's thought that deep techs solve substantial, impactful problems by default, and so it's equally so thought that the market they are addressing is big enough. It's thought that the technology carries a unique value proposition in itself, in contrast to current technologies, and so the main risk is seen on the timing side of things. So it can be that it takes too long of a time to reach market-ready maturity, or it can be that the market is just not yet ready for a change of that scale that your startup is aiming at. So it's almost as though it's believed that the technology in itself is so powerful that the other business drivers, such as your value proposition or execution, can be almost forgotten. However, let me say this. If no one relevant to you, and by relevant I mean your potential customer, knows about your value proposition, does not understand it, or is not tempted by it, your deep tech is basically worth nothing. And if you just wait for the perfect market timing, you basically are just dying slowly. And I think that as a deep tech company, you actually need to get people to talk about your product way before your product is even ready. And the more people that know about your product, the easier it is actually to attract funding, customers, partners, and ultimately do good business. So at Maki, we invest in deep tech and brand-driven companies, and some see those as two separate pockets, and indeed they can be, because we can also invest in not-so-techy companies, but in companies with great brand potential. But with our deep tech companies, we would rather see those as combined. And this doesn't mean that you have to, or that your brand has to be perfected, or you have to look like Nike when we invest, but rather that founders understand the importance of having a strong brand and are willing to work on that. And that's also then our promise to the founders, that we have the expertise to help on those matters. So while strong brands are often associated with business to consumer or direct to consumer, I believe it's equally important for B2B companies and deep tech companies. And so one example from our portfolio is IQM, and Jan, who's in the picture. So IQM is building hardware systems to enable the world's first scalable quantum computing solution. So they are developing these special quantum processors that basically offer better functionality for a universal superconducting quantum computer. And their global team has already yielded breakthroughs in areas such as thermal management and other areas that affect the computational speed and information accuracy. And for IQM, while what they are building will likely have a substantial impact, it may take them a while to reach or be market ready, as with any quantum computing company. And meanwhile, they have to be able to attract big funding rounds without being able to show the traditional VC metrics, for instance, in terms of revenue. And also, they have to be able to attract top quantum talent globally to ice cold Helsinki, which is maybe not the easiest task in the world. Hence, why building a strong, credible brand of European leader in quantum is extremely important for a deep tech company such as IQM. Another deep tech example from our portfolio is Spinnova. And they are developing the most sustainable fiber in the world, EA, a replacement for cotton. So they have this patented mechanical method that turns cellulose into textile fiber without basically with using 99% less water, 0% harmful chemicals, and 0% waste or side streams. And having just completed their most important milestone so far, which was getting proof of concept from their pilot factory, they are now getting ready to revolutionize the raw material base of the textile industry together with the leading textile brands. And again, building this strong, credible brand matters for Spinnova, as the first textile brands that they are going to work with will have a significant impact on who the following brands that they get to work with will be. So the first brands will work as their most important references and will also, through their feedback, probably guide the path of Spinnova's further product development. And equally so, wrong first brands or first customers can send a strong negative signal to the rest of the following brands with their credibility or with their brand and their use cases. So the only way to appeal to these preferred textile brands is actually to build such a desirable value proposition and style for Spinnova themselves that even the most well-guarded brands can't resist joining Spinnova's journey. And additionally, while their business model is B2B, our hypothesis is that they benefit greatly from also having this pull from the end user side, which is actually the consumer side, and hence they need to be able to build a desirable consumer-facing brand as well as a B2B. So, to the point of the presentation, what should your VC be doing to help with your deep tech company's brand? At Maki, we often start, or typically start, with talking resources. So as investors, we have influence over that the startup has adequate resources, both money and talent, to also develop the brand. And the first conversations are often basically just a reality check. So especially with the deep tech companies, we see that maturity of the budget is going into things like R&D, whereas marketing and communications, where the brand work actually primarily happens, is almost completely overlooked. And our most critical advice is that the value proposition of the company should be owned by the whole organization, but marketing should take the lead, and this simply cannot be outsourced. So if you do not yet have that marketing pro on board, you probably want to allocate some resources into recruiting one. And again, there are CMOs out there with all the possible profiles, so some genuine generalists, but some or maturity with core strengths in some specific areas, such as brand or product marketing or performance marketing, and as part of these reality checks, the right profile for the marketeer is also defined. When we are on the same page about resources, and you have the marketing pro on board, the first task that you will want to give him or her is probably defining that value proposition, so work on that core of that onion. And that ideally someone in the VC firm should actually be able to work as a sort of a sounding board for forming that value proposition. And value prop, of course, by default is fairly simple. So you need to be able to define what the product is, who would use the product, what value your product actually delivers to the customers, and how your product compares to other products, and spin that all out so that it inspires. And later, this value proposition works as this kind of a glue between your company's different functions and helps basically in making critical trade-offs between things such as defining your sales arguments or deciding on your product features. Nailing that value proposition, however, is not very easy. So too often we see something like this. So very generic, cut and paste value propositions that could be applied to basically any company in any industry. So, I mean, who wouldn't want to optimize for success, right? So to give you a concrete example, we were working with one of our unannounced portfolio companies on their value prop, and when we first asked them to write down what their value prop is, it took them about, I don't know, half a day to write what you can see on the left side. And together we steered it towards the direction on the right. And funny enough, it actually, trust me, says all the critical things that needed to be said. So the takeaway from here, remember, if your own organization is not inspired by the value proposition or cannot even understand it or remember it, it surely won't inspire others further down the line, like your customers or the press. And just remember that you are out there competing with these, such as Varjo with their human eye resolution. I mean, what is that exactly even? But it sounds very cool. Aura, the world's first wellness ring that improves sleep quality, and Stripe, whose mission is to increase the GDP of the internet. I mean, that is quite a big one. So hate to break it to you, but no one really cares about the intricate details of your tech. So, what can a VC do? First, I said that check that you have adequate resources. Second, I said help with nailing down your value proposition. And third, I would say that when the value proposition is in place and inspires everyone in the team, you have that marketing pro on board, your product roadmap is agreed upon, and maybe you have even locked in your first customers. It's time to focus on continuous messaging and sort of building that brand that evolves with the business, so those layers of the onion. And for a company, this is also typically a time or a tipping point at which you want to maybe recruit more people into your marketing team and or seek for external help when it comes to branding. And ideally, again, your brief to them, so to the external agencies, that should actually include your value proposition and your product roadmap. And you probably now understand why it was such a terrible idea to actually outsource already the work that goes into forming that value proposition. And now that marketing pro that you had on board and who was working on that value proposition in the first place should lead all the work that goes into further building that brand. And this because otherwise there is no real accountability for the marketing budget, for instance, and believe me, your brand assets, the first ones, won't look like €1,000 if you are not willing to put in more than 10. And also managing this collaboration with the externals actually requires professionalism, so you need to know what you're buying, and it's not different from hardware manufacturing or software development. If you don't know what you're doing, it's going to show in the end result. And how does that VC relate to all this? So ideally, that VC, who was your sounding board when it came to the value proposition, can now help in finding that right external help or the hires, and who can help with your PR or branding or marketing. And ideally, those connections should be in that VC's network. For instance, at Maki, we leverage our Maki house consisting of our core team, our limited partners, so the fund investors, and our portfolio companies, as well as some external experts. So for instance, we run brand labs with all the new entrants to the portfolio together with an external agency to spar. As well as we try and facilitate collaboration across our portfolio, for instance, through Slack or different roundtables discussions, so that founders can share experiences. Yet still, we never forget that the real vision needs to come from within the company, from that marketing pro who led the work around the value proposition in the first place, because someone needs to navigate this mess. So see the big picture, but also the mighty tiny details that goes into consistently building that brand. I wanted to leave you with something concrete. So here is a list of questions that I would like to hear as an investor, and that you can maybe take with you to your potential investors to test their brand savviness. So you can ask questions such as, how do you work with founders when it comes to branding? What's your philosophy? What's your investment team's experience when it comes to branding? What brands have you worked with? Are there any relevant connections in your network, for instance, agencies or key hires? So that's it. Thank you. And if you ever find yourself in a conversation where people are telling you that they're hiring an intern before the CMO, this is my last 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauliina. Thank you. Can we do one quick question? Is there any questions from the audience for Pauliina? Would you like some questions?
I can answer one question,
okay,
yes. Then
so
I
we need one question from the audience. Guys?
No questions. All was very, very super clear.
Very informative. All right. Thank you very much,
Thank
Pauliina.
you.